Why is it that we struggle with studying the Bible? I think there's several reasons. I'll never forget when I was in college, our dean of students got up and spoke to the student body, and he said he was convinced, of course, that we are in the spiritual warfare, and that whenever Christians sit down to try to read the Bible and pray, that Satan knows the good that will do, how to draw us closer to God, give us the encouragement, the wisdom, the direction that we need. And so in the spiritual warfare, he's convinced that whenever we take a moment to say, I'm going to read the Bible and pray, that Satan launches his strongest demons to distract us, to discourage us, to get our attention on something else. Professor Bradley Wright, sociologist at the University of Connecticut, explains, from his analysis, people who identify Christians as Christians but rarely go to church, married couples, 60% get divorced. But those who identify as Christians, go to church regularly, 38% have been divorced. Research has shown that couples, though, who pray or read the Bible together daily, attend church together weekly, have a divorce rate of less than 1 in every 1,105. That is far less than 1%. If I could give you a guarantee, you pay me a certain amount of money and I can guarantee 99% chance of success in your marriage, how much would that be worth to you? I'm about to give it to you so you can put the money in the offering today. According to Gallup, the secret is this: read the Bible, pray, and worship together 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. Less than 1% get divorced. Daniel, the prophet in the Old Testament, prayed 3 times a day. He prayed so consistently, had a time and a place so consistently that his enemies knew exactly where he'd be praying in the middle of the day. Create a habit that you associate with Bible study, and God will use that to make you grow, to help you grow. Next, I would say find a reliable and readable translation. The Bible is so easy to misinterpret, isn't it? That's why we need a Bible that is both reliable and readable. I heard about a couple of priests in a monastery who had been told to go back to the original manuscripts and clarify some translations. And so they worked on it for hour after hour, day after day, when finally one priest just started to break out in tears. He just started to cry and cry. And the other guy says, well, what's wrong? The priest says, we had it all wrong. All these years, he says, we've had it all wrong. We had what wrong? The other priest says. He said, one word, one letter. He says, the word should have been celebrate. It is so easy to misunderstand the Bible. There are over 450 translations of the Bible in English alone. If you grew up when I did, until about the mid-70s, if you carried a Bible, it was a King James Version. The King James Version originally translated in 1611. It's a beautiful translation. It's a poetic translation. But in the 60s and 70s, new translations began to come out because the King James language started to become arcane. Did you know that there are 300 words in the King James that don't mean today what it meant when originally written? For instance, there's a quote where Jesus says, suffer the little children to come to me and forbid them not. Well, what does suffer mean to us? Suffer means, hurt, right? Well, in that day, it meant permit. On the other hand, the word let in the King James Version, well, if you play tennis, you know what a let is? On a serve, the tennis ball has been hindered by the net. Let in 1611 meant to hinder. So today, if in 1611, if you would have said, suffer the little children, let the parents, it would have meant permit the children, hinder the parents. Completely different message from what we would mean today. In our day, what does conversation mean? Conversations means talking back and forth. In ancient times, or in 1611, it meant conduct, all that we do in behavior. The New Testament was originally written in Koine Greek. Koine means common. It was written in the common language of the people. And then Jerome came along because Koine wasn't being used by people anymore in the 4th century, and he translated it into what called the vulgar language. The Vulgate, the common language of the day, Latin. And that became the primary language that people used. And then Martin Luther came along, and he did this radical thing. He dared to translate the Vulgate into German, so the common German people could read. You know what? That literally changed history. When people started to read the Bible in their own language, the church, of course, didn't like that. How dare he change it like that? Do it in the language of the people, and they wanted to kill him for it, of course. But you see the pattern. We need to read scriptures that are reliable, they're accurate to what the original manuscripts said, and they are readable. That's why I like the Christian Standard Bible, which I tend to use here. For a while, we used the English Standard Version, which is a reliable, they really do try to do word-by-word translation, but it's clumsy for some people, and so we found the Christian Standard Bible a little bit more accessible for people, like the NIV Bible can be as well. On the other hand, there are paraphrases that are not really translations there so much as they are interpretations, attempts of interpreting thoughts rather than interpreting the language. Paraphrases are like the Message or the Living Bible or the Passion Bible, which from what I understand is there's actually heresy being taught in that, as well as there's a new upside down Kingdom Bible that has just been interpreted or translated, which is not faithful to Scripture either. It's very much influenced by culture in a negative way, and therefore biased. But the advantage of the scriptures that like ESV or NIV, 2011, or Christian Standard Bible is they're translated by groups of translators, and so you don't get the bias that you would have if just one person is translating or interpreting. What you have with things like the Message or the Living Bible, they're one person's interpretation, so they're just filled with bias, and sometimes, candidly, although it's very readable, they're really not true to what the original scripture was saying. Kenneth Taylor, for instance, wrote the Living Bible to paraphrase the Bible so his children would find it readable, which is really not a bad idea. But this is how paraphrases work. King James Version, 1 Kings 20:11 says, "Let not him that girdeth on his harness boast himself as he that putteth it off." The Christian Standard Bible just says, "Don't let the one who puts on his armor boast like the one who takes it off." In other words, before you go into battle, don't boast like you've already won. Don't be a trash talker before you've won the game. The Living Bible, though, paraphrases it, "Don't count your chickens before they hatch." Now, can you imagine somebody reading the Bible for the first time, and they're reading the Living Bible, and they come to that 1 Kings 20 in the Living Bible, "Don't count your chickens before they hatch," and they think to themselves, "I always wondered where that phrase came from. It comes from the Bible." No, it doesn't come from the Bible. That's not what was being said. It's an interpretation in a modern thought to try to communicate the idea. Now, the most word-for-word literal translation that we can get, American Standard Bible or the New American Standard Bible, is good. The most radical paraphrases, like I said, are the Message or the Passion, or even the more modern NIV Upside Down Kingdom Bible. In the middle, you have things like the Christian Standard Bible or the NIV. So, readable, reliable. Next, find a plan that works for you and start in the right place. I would not encourage you to pick up the Bible and start reading in Genesis and then read straight through. The Bible is not one book to be read like a novel. It's a library of 66 books. Just like you wouldn't go into the library and say, I think I'll just pick the first one on the left here and read through the rest of the books in the library. So you don't do that with the Bible. If that's what you do in the Bible, you'll do fine in Genesis because it's interesting, a lot of stories. But by the time you get to Leviticus, the laws of Israel, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, you'll be like, what in the world is going on? I mean, some of this is moral stuff, but some of this is like cultic worship stuff, like what the temple worship stuff, and some of this is lost stuff for people. And it just kind of gets confusing. It reminds me of a little boy who asked his dad a question. He's in the back seat eating an apple. His dad's in the front seat. He says, "Daddy, how comes when I take a bite of the apple, it turns brown?" The father responds, "Well, when you bite the skin off the apple, immediately the meat of the apple is exposed to the O2 in the air. The O2 in the air oxidizes the apple, changing its molecular structure, which changes its coloration." After a long pause, the little boy looked around. He said, "Daddy, you talking to me?" If you're new to the Bible and you just jump into, Leviticus or Ezekiel, you may kind of be like, "God, you talking to me? I don't understand this." There are several approaches that I think people find helpful. If you want to start in the New Testament with the Gospels, the stories of Jesus, I would start with the book of Mark, because the book of Mark is brief and it moves fast. The word immediately is one of Mark's favorite words. Immediately they left their nets. Immediately they entered the synagogue. Immediately the little girl walked. In fact, over half the times the word immediately is used in the Bible, it's used in the book of Mark. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke all cover the majority of Jesus' life. Some people say, start with the book of John. No, the book of John covers the stuff that Matthew, Mark, and Luke don't cover. It's kind of a supplemental book that fills in what they don't. And it's also very philosophical. I would start with something like Mark, although there's not a bad gospel to start with. Next, I would encourage, maybe you want to read the book of Acts. The book of Acts is the history book of the early church. When I was a kid, we used to be told, if we will do what they did, we will be what they were. If you want to drink water at the purest, you drink it at the source. When I used to play baseball in middle school, we played, there was a spring close to the field. It came straight from it was the freshest water you could. It was wonderful. But if you were to drink that water after it had gone downstream a couple of miles, I wouldn't want to drink it at all. If you want to understand what the church is to be, some people look at like the 4th century and 5th century and say, this is where the church... No. Look at the book of Acts. How did they function? What did they do? And then you'll discover a lot about what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Many people like to start with the book of Proverbs. Proverbs has 31 chapters. You can read one chapter a day and get through a 31-day month. I like a balanced approach. I have a group of people that we read through the Bible. We read a little Old Testament, a little New Testament, a little Psalm, and a little Proverb. Old Testament prepares us for Jesus. New Testament speaks about Jesus and the king and the kingdom and the church. The Psalms, prayers, relationship with God. Proverbs, wisdom for loving people. And it's a balanced approach. I would also suggest that you join a group. Sometime in this video, we're going to show you some codes or some ways to be able to get involved so you can connect with some people who are reading through the Bible or some kind of Bible programs. Maybe it's just the New Testament or maybe it's just a book at a time, whatever, that you can join them. But I find it so encouraging to get up every morning and to realize there's a good-sized group of people that are reading the same thing that I'm reading today. And sometimes I'll make comments, and often others will make comments, and by doing that, we gain from what other people have heard in the devotional time that day. But it also gives us a sense of accountability. Hey, we're not alone in this. Finally, read the Bible for life change. Focus on transformation, not information. If someone were to ask you, how are you doing spiritually? Tell me about your spiritual life. What would you say? Some people will say, well, I read the Bible and I pray and I go to church, I'm serving this way. If you were to ask Jesus, Jesus, how's your spiritual life? You know what Jesus would say, how to measure? Are you loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Or are you loving your neighbor as yourself? My Greek professor liked to remind us that the purpose of sound doctrine is not being able to answer the questions correctly. It's sound lifestyle. In fact, the reason sound doctrine matters is because sound doctrine leads to right lifestyle. Bad teaching, bad doctrine leads to bad lifestyle. If you want to drink water at the purest, you drink it at the source. When I used to play baseball in middle school, we played, there was a spring close to the field. It came straight from it was the freshest water. It was wonderful. But if you were to drink that water after it had gone downstream a couple of miles, I wouldn't want to drink it at all. If you want to understand what the church is to be, some people look at like the 4th century and 5th century and say, oh, this is where the church... No. Look at the book of Acts. How did they function? What did they do? And then you'll discover a lot about what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. That word meditates is the picture of a cow chewing the cud. The cow eats the grass, chews the grass, then goes off to the side and chews it some more, and chews it some more. For the Bible to really change our lives, we need to study it and chew on it. And then as we're getting ready for the day, we chew on it some more. And as we're driving the car, we chew on it some more. And when our mind is resting and we're not thinking about anything, we chew on it some more. And when we go to bed at night, we chew on it some more. And as we chew on it, God takes what's in our head and allows it to percolate into our hearts.